After an almost 17-hour siege, an ending everyone had prayed would never come. Shortly after 2 this morning, teams of tactical response police stormed the Lindt Cafe from either end, guns blazing. The cafe lit up with bursts of bullets and flashbangs, stun grenades, leaving the gunman dazed and some 15 hostages terrified. These extraordinary pictures captured by a single 7 News camera, allowed back by police into our evacuated newsroom directly opposite Lindt Cafe and looking directly into the cafe's 4 windows. It was over in 34 seconds, and in the silence afterwards, the only sounds, cries of pain and pleas for help.
As Chris says, I find that very hard to watch, but Chris and Greg, just being across Martin Place, extremely hard to revisit those events. Going back to the morning of the 15th of December 2004 at the Lindt Cafe, we had Tory Johnson, a bright, energetic, extremely popular manager of the cafe, getting about his daily routine. It was going to be a busy day with a lot of Christmas shoppers coming in for their coffee and hot chocolate. Katrina Dawson, a highly respected barrister, mother of 3, in there buying the hot chocolate that she swore kept her on a game in her busy legal practice. And we all know in graphic and grisly detail what happened over the next 16 hours. At the start of that day, at a cafe not too far from Lindt, was Chris Reason. In fact, it was Chris's first day back at work after 6 months long service leave. He was having a coffee just to ease back into his working day. Greg Parker as well was getting ready to start what was otherwise a routine day of covering events for 7 News. But of course, their lives, like all of ours, changed so dramatically at about 10:15 that morning. Many of you know Chris. He is very familiar to all of you who have watched Channel 7 News now for many years. A celebrated overseas correspondent, senior reporter. I was looking at his resume and felt very envious. Think of a big story over the last 25 years and he's been at all of them. And Greg Parker as well has been with Channel 7 for 20 years and similarly has been there at reporter's side for those big events. And I'm thrilled certainly to see Chris, but also that Greg is here because far too often cameramen are the unsung heroes of what we do as TV journalists. You learn something very quickly when you start in TV journalism, and that is always be nice to the cameraman because they can make you look very good or very crap. And Greg is certainly one of the best. Before I introduce Chris, I just want to read a bit of what the judges said about his reporting on that night and that morning. On a day when there was an excess of wild speculation and false reporting, Reason's reporting was restrained and sober, as was appropriate in covering an event in which so many lives were at stake. He didn't speculate wildly, he simply explained to viewers what was going on and where. He led coverage that was, as a result, utterly authoritative. And he did so live, on the fly, over an exceptionally long period of time. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Reason.
Thank you, Michael, for those lovely remarks. Well done, mate. So, look, it's a great honour for both of us to be here today. We thank you for inviting us down, and a great honour too, obviously, to have won the Graham Perkin speech as the Graham Perkin Award. That was something that I'm still struggling to deal with. I've got to say, it's been an extraordinary honour, and I'm still not sure that I am worthy. I was just maybe more appropriate to be given an endurance award for surviving 27 hours of small talk with the cameraman, but. Look, it was an extraordinary night. We were both on the plane on the way down trying to work out where we begin, all of the many anecdotes and stories we have from that night. And I guess with a room full of professional journalists and PR people, it would be it would be professional suicide not to bury the lead. So I'll start right at the beginning with that headline from the day, the words we've quoted so many times: window 2, hostage down. Window 2, hostage down. We'll never forget those 4 words. They, of course, preceded the raid on the cafe, with the police piling in both ends, and with explosive finale to what had been an extraordinary day, and of course came just seconds after the cold-blooded murder of Tory Johnson. We'll never forget that. We'll never forget the sounds. We won't forget the sounds because they were so clear. They were so clear because we were so close. We were just 40 metres away. 40 metres away. On the Channel 7 newsroom, up on the 4th floor, the sunrise level, just next to Koshi and Sam's desks, just next to the police sniper position. And I can tell you it's an unnerving thing to witness in a metropolitan newsroom, a fully kitted up sniper, camouflage on. He's holding the 50 cal rifle. I don't know how many of you have seen those. They're massive, heavy things, bipod at the front, his eyes up at the high-powered sight. He's got Man Monis in his crosshairs, and he's preparing for a kill in the middle of a metropolitan newsroom. You don't often have that situation where police, newsrooms, guns. It's not a normal day, not a normal mix, but it was far from a normal event. I've got to say that in the downtimes, the very few downtimes between the marathon live crosses we were doing all night, I was sitting there at times just going, what on earth is going on here? On a personal level, I've spent my entire life chasing the world's biggest stories. Been in war zones from Bosnia to the Middle East. I've done disasters from September 11 to Fukushima and the Boxing Day tsunami. I've covered funerals like Mandela's and Princess Di's, but here I am, and the biggest story of the year, and possibly my career, certainly the biggest story that's getting the most recognition of my career, is happening just 40 metres away from my desk. News can come to you, and it was one of the first lessons that was endorsed, relearned for me that night, and I think young journos might take a leaf from that, might take some understanding from that, you know, you can have the CNN ambitions and dreams, but news does happen here. Big news happens in our own backyard. And I've just for me, just that whole concept of having to go overseas to cut your teeth, go overseas to get the big stories, to get on the big stage, to get the world news, it's a bit of bunkum. It does happen here. We'd like to share a few of those lessons with you today, share a bit of the backstory to the coverage of the cafe siege. Greg will get up in a moment and tell us about his extraordinary moments as he managed to talk his way into the building and stay in that building and get us those extraordinary pictures. And then after that, we'll take some questions if you have any. For me, if I can go back, the day started with the farewell broadcast for Melissa Doyle, who left Sunrise about a year ago and went on to do the 4 o'clock news. It was a long and rolling event, 3 hours of tribute coverage. You got a bigger send-off than Richie Benaud. It was quite extraordinary. Everybody was there to say how great she was and what she'd done. It had been a terrific career on that program. But in the corner of the studio was Kerry Stokes, and he pointed at me and told me to come over, the owner of the network, giving me the finger and saying, get over here now. And I don't know how many of you know Kerry. Fantastic man. He is a terrific boss, and I say that obviously he's a boss, but he's extraordinary. He's got this gravel-pitched voice, very low-slung, almost like it's painful for him to speak, but he says to me, and I'll give you my best Kerry Stokes impersonation, he says, Chris, can I tell you the first order of business every time I have a boardroom meeting? Your fucking holiday leave. Will you hurry up and take some? He quotes to me down to the day and the hour how much holidays I've incurred over 25 years at Channel 7. I think to myself, warning bells, get out of the building. So I packed up the family and headed off, as Michael said, for 6 months, terrific time with my family, backpacking around the world. We got in a Winnebago around California. We lived in a lighthouse in Croatia. We do all the things you do as you're approaching 50 and the kids are still talking to you. But the first day back reporting was December 15, Monday morning. I walked in, and a confession here. I've got to say my head wasn't in the right space. It's hard to drag your way out of the Scottish Lochs and the Yosemite Mountains, and there I was walking to Channel 7 and The longest journey of my trip, I think, was the stairwell up into the building. Went up to the Chief of Staff, said, much going on? Nah, mate, no news around today. Go and grab yourself a cuppa, I'll give you a call if something breaks. So I head off to go and get a coffee. Fortunately, I can't stand the coffee at Lindt Cafe. I went the other way to Bond Cafe, and it's just 50 metres, 100 metres down the street. Not long after getting that flat white, began to hear the commotion outside and poked my head out and saw people running towards Martin Place, running away from Martin Place. And so I started walking towards it. The phone rings, the Chief of Staff, the same one. Mate, you know how I said I'd give you that call? Here's the call. And he asked me to check it out. My first reaction was a pretty reluctant one. I said, oh, mate, it's an armed hold-up, isn't it? Oh, I don't feel like doing an armed hold-up right now. Where's the bloody police reporter? I was the last reporter in the building, so I had to go. And as soon as I got to Martin Place and I saw what the police were doing, pushing me back, pushing everybody back, I realised this wasn't any ordinary armed hold-up. This was something different. We could see already the hostages were going up in the window. So I ran back into the newsroom, up to the third floor. And this is lesson number 2, perhaps, but I walked in, the first thing I saw, and for those of you that know Channel 7 studios, soaring glass windows, 20 metres high at the front, and right front and centre of it is the Lindt Cafe. It's right there in front of all our desks. And the first thing I saw was 20 or 30 colleagues all standing around, staring. Professional journalists, standing, staring agog at what was happening. Very few of them had their iPhones out. None of them were reporting. No one was doing a live cross. No one. The moment had everybody frozen. And it was an extraordinary thing. And I think, again, another valuable lesson there. When news comes to you, you've got to remember, you've got to keep playing the journalistic role. We could have done a bunch of things that day that we probably should have done. We kept the bulletin, the live coverage going with Larry and Kylie. We probably should have taken over. News should have taken it straight away. We should have been doing live crosses up to the 20 journalists standing in those windows. And what I can't believe is that we left when the police evacuated us. We didn't roll on the evacuations. We didn't get that live as they were pushing us out of the building. And we didn't resist. And I wonder whether we should have said no and not gone, or at least a couple of us, and just held our ground. But we left. And such was the gravity. That was the seriousness of what was happening. Everybody was caught up in it. Not often news comes to you in that way. So we left the building, we were outside, and effectively what we'd done is we'd given up the greatest competitive advantage on a story I think I've ever seen, and suddenly we'd gone from everything to having nothing. And as I said in the speech the other night, it's very hard to do television without a television station. As it happens, you know, as the minutes pass, we lost those critical few moments at the beginning, but we got a broadcast together, made up, cobbled together from live link trucks and TVU packs to Geros. Melbourne's helped, they hosted it down here. Brisbane was cutting stories, Perth was helping hosting as well. This multi-station, unilateral, sort of cooperative effort across the network that was quite extraordinary, thanks to our extraordinary technicians that day. But, you know, and for the rest of the day, 7 hours, I was tethered to a link truck on Phillip Street, about 100 metres away, just doing live broadcasts, unable to see a thing. One colleague, unbeknownst to me, when all of us were leaving, was managing to get himself back in. This colleague here, Greg Parker, who I think that day displayed greater initiative than I've seen any of the hundreds of cameramen I've worked with over the years. It was an extraordinary effort. I think at this point he should take over and talk through his moments of getting back into that building and how he, I will say, saved Channel 7's coverage that day. Greg.
G'day everyone. Thanks for having me. As Chris said before, it's great to come to Melbourne. My first trip down, he was a little kid when I first started shooting sport, was for Plugger's groin. When the Swans made, I think it was the 96 final. And that day, as they were walking into the MCG, I stuck my camera in front of Paul Kelly and asked him how he was feeling. And work made a big deal about getting this exclusive interview on the match day. So it's great to be back in Melbourne. I love it, and it's great to be in a room full of colleagues. I know nothing will leave this room from what we're about to say. There's former bosses, colleagues, everyone, and of course Chris. So Thanks for having me. As Chris said, that was a bizarre, crazy day. My thoughts are never far from what I saw happen to Tori and Katrina. It's horrible, and to give you the background of how we came to be there to record that, I was in a car on the way back to work with another reporter. We'd just done a lame interview at the Traffic Management Centre out near Sydney Airport, and we were cruising back on the Eastern Distributor, and we got a call from a producer saying, "Oh, where are you guys? It looks like there's an armed hold-up happening out the window." And I was driving, so I was hearing it sort of second-hand, and the journo going, whatever. "Oh no, that looks like there could be something serious here. It looks like an ISIS flag." And the journo leans forward and says, "Mate, let's head to Bill and Tony's, one of our favourite coffee shops." He said, "The CBD sounds a bit chaotic. Let's stay clear of it." And I thought about it. I was half tempted, and I decided just to put my foot down and see what was going on. As fate would have it, the road was getting closed right at the end of the expressway, so I just literally jumped out of the car, left it on the sidewalk, and ran for the back door, camera, tripod, bum bag with a couple of batteries and a disc. And that was the last I saw of the journo and my soundo. Cruised up the back steps when I to look at me, you may not know it, but I am partial to a bit of Lint. Unlike Rezo, I'm a big fan of their work. I had intricate knowledge of the building, which turned out to help. And I knew our building pretty well. I've been there since we built it, and previously throughout my career. So I felt I sort of had a good grasp of what may be necessary, and bolted straight for level 4, where I knew we had a good visual straight across to Lint. It was chaos in the newsroom. It was being evacuated. There were police, there was security. I only knew what I'd been told from that phone call. So I did what we're sort of trained to do. I set up a camera and press record. And from that point on, it was arguing for about 10 minutes as different police came up, different security, our building managers saying, "Get out, you're being evacuated." And I argued the toss. I said, "We need this shot. There's no one else here. I know I'm behind glass." Eventually they'd leave me alone, and then another one would come back. I thought, okay, I'm on a wide angle lens here. I can see a gunman, I can see hostages. This is full on. I'll whip upstairs to the storeroom, which only 2 of us have a key to. So again, fate had it that I had that key on me, that I'd grabbed it as I left the car, and went upstairs to our storeroom, where we have this $30,000 lens that has probably only been used 5 times in the 20 years I've been there. And it just enables you to basically get a headshot at 100 metres. It's an incredible piece of technology, and it sits there gathering dust. So I thought to myself, as I went up and just realised the building was all but deserted by a few police. If I take my time about this, it might be playing into my hands. So camera was recording, the shot was there. I sat in the storeroom for 10 minutes and collected my thoughts. Funnily enough, when I came down, the police had left. I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll just put my lens on, start recording again." Sent a couple of quick messages just to let the bosses know where I was and what I was getting. And for the first time in my career, I suddenly had a message from the CEO. "Can you send us some images off your phone?" I went, "Yeah, here we go." Eventually the police came back through, and you could imagine they weren't so thrilled to see me there still blazing away with the camera. And I was quite sharply told that it was time to leave, and then the choice was no longer mine. So I argued the toss again, showed them the shot. I said, "Look at this. This is the gunman. This is the hostages." And they said, "Yeah, mate, we'll let them know. Good on you. Cheers." Righto. Followed orders, left the building, went downstairs into Elizabeth Street, and again, fate played a role. A guy walked up that I'd heard of and never met. His name was Bill Forbes. He's Channel 7's head of risk and security. Unbeknownst to me, former Navy SEAL captain and SAS. I went, He made small talk with the cops, explained that we had to clear the building to make sure all staff were out. And they complied. They said, "That's a great idea." And I sort of said, "Hey, while we clear the building, I'll come with you. Can I just check my camera? It's about time for a disc change in the battery." And he knew the TV game well enough and listened to what I'd said and said, "Righto." So we went in through the back door and we swept the building. And just, again, fate played its part. As we're rushing up to level 4, the snipers came in and said, can you show us any vantage points? Where can we see across to Lint? And I said, oh, better than that, come and have a look at the camera. And chance has it, there's Man Monis, gun to someone's head in the window. And straight up they asked if I was prepared to stay and keep spotting for them, because that was the kind of visual that they couldn't get through their rifle sights. And it grew from there. Could we get, as they pointed out, monitors all through the building? Could we get other cameras lined up, trained on the building? Could we cover each exit? And that was it. The day wore on. Snipers came and left. I explained to them that there was bulletproof glass, and they said, what's its rating? I explained to them it was a 50 cal. They said, no worries, they just bought in bigger guns. And I was like, okay. We got the threats. We were getting detailed intelligence. Like, they had a police radio next to me, so I was sort of hearing everything that was happening throughout. And my mind was racing in the 2 months. Like, sure, I'm here, happy to help. Who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't do everything you can to help hostages in a situation like that? But I thought I better keep rolling, better keep these other cameras up and rolling. And that's what we did. We pumped the vision out to Melbourne and Canberra so that we knew that, because our station was deserted, there was no way of recording it. I explained to the police that was necessary as a backup, but obviously for us, for news, it was going to be of great importance come the next day or when it all washed up. The police explained the operation, and their idea and their playbook, so to speak, is to arrest. They were going to wait him out and arrest him and bring about a peaceful outcome. And so we sat in for the long haul. We made small talk. It was times where, I had to ask people to look down the camera for me while we took breaks, and went scavenging food off people's desks and through the staff fridges. Sort of had to apologise the next few days for people that we'd, taken liberty with whatever we could find. And heard the gunman's demands. At times I'd try and text people just to point out facts. They were really adamant that we couldn't use the vision live. It was too distressing. The things we were seeing were just downright horrible. It was abuse and really, really gruesome to watch the stress. They were people the same as you and me. Like, all of us in media, I think, love a coffee and a chat. And just imagine being at your local cafe and being caught up in that. So there was very much times when both the sniper and I were sort of in despair. Like, I was wanting it to end. I wanted to see, particularly the women, free. The gunman, I didn't care how they ended it. I was, to be honest, by the end of it, I was really happy to see him get what was coming to him. And throughout the whole ordeal, I was aware that we were negotiating to try and get a reporter back in, A, because we'd been helping the police, and B, because we felt we deserved some gratitude, if for want of a better word, that as a TV network caught up in the middle of it, we were without any hope of covering it properly, and thankfully we got the message that had been okayed. And even more thankfully was the fact that they had given Rezo the go-ahead. Rezo I've known, as we said, for 20 years. We've travelled the world together. And I don't know how many journos could walk into a situation like that to be told, mate, all I can do is set up a camera in the corner, but I'm watching 4 cameras now. You're going to have to do this pretty much on your own. Walk in front of it. Here's the spot on the floor. Don't move from that or else you'll be out of frame. So on top of having all the inside knowledge that he couldn't use, he had very little support from me, but did an amazing job in keeping a lid on the story, in my opinion, because Rezo was aware of so much more than anyone else, but imagine we were not in a position to do it and to discuss that at length. As for what happened during the day, there were times when we had to, for example, plunge the operational commanders decided to plunge the newsroom into darkness to ensure that none of the police personnel that was set up could be seen. So it was a case of, here mate, here's a bulletproof vest. Can you go up to the front glass and go and shut down all the monitors, adjust the cameras? And it was scary, but again, I was doing what I think anyone would. If you're told to help or asked to help, you help. And so I'm pretty sure I've almost brought you up to speed about the moment where Rezo waltzed back in, and there's a good colourful anecdote that he'll share with you about his entry being escorted in by a police officer.
So I come in, I meet the police at the arranged time of 5:30 at the police line, the cordon just outside, about 100 metres from the building, and this young, quite attractive, blonde policewoman, sort of in the flak jacket, strapped in tight, sort of walks me up, and she's got the pursed lips, but not talking. No, the body language is all wrong. And I said, listen, I just want to say thanks very much for letting us in. She said, don't thank me, I didn't approve this. She was pissed off. And so many of the cops in the building were that media were allowed to be in there. And you can understand why, because the stakes were really high. And a mistake, if our techs had put Greg's camera to line, shown those pictures, if I'd spoken about operational stuff that was happening right there in front of us that might have tipped off Man Monos to what was going on, because we could see even in the darkness, couldn't we, that his face was lit up by his iPad. He was walking around. He was monitoring what was going on in the media and social media world. So we had to be careful, and we were. And as they led me up the stairs to join up with Greg, they read the Safety Riot Act out to me. Basically, the HR report basically was all about, look, these are the lines of sight. If you can see the windows, he can see you. Duck under this desk, stay over here. Don't walk into here, don't walk into there. The building, for anybody that knows Sunrise, is a glass fishbowl of a building. Glass roof, glass walls, glass doors. And they said, look, our fear is that backpack. If there is a bomb in the backpack, it goes off and the glass shatters. You will hear the sound of the explosion before the glass catches up with you. So just dive under a desk. And they delivered me to Greg and to the sniper, both of them aiming their respective instruments at the windows of the cafe opposite. And they said, do you consent to the position? Almost like a waiver of liability. Looked across at what the guys in the cafe were going through and realised that was what real risk looked like. Of course, as any broadcaster would, I said, yep, I'm here, I'm happy. And we stayed there. And then it was pretty much 6 o'clock, where the agreement was one live cross and then get out. They let us do that one live cross and never bugged us again. I wasn't about to offer to leave, so I stayed. And then we just broadcast all night for Channel 7, the worldwide networks, BBC, ITN, NBC, all of them, all night. Everybody wanted a piece of the position that we had. It was all pretty calm. About 8, 9 o'clock, he'd left the lights on inside the cafe. We could see everything, but at that point, he switched the lights off, and I remember everybody kind of breathed in and waited for a couple of minutes. The tension was intense as we waited for something to happen. It didn't. He'd just turned the lights off for his own security. And that's the way it stayed for the next 6 hours. And then 2 a.m, the time when it all goes down. Essentially, I got to confess that I thought they were going to talk him out. We knew who he was. We knew he was more of a crazed criminal than a crazed jihadi. I thought they were going to get him out of there, talk him out rather than take him out. And I said to Greg, mate, I'm going to go and sleep. I'm going to go and find a place to nap. Sunrise couch is just in the corner on the other side of the sniper, so I kicked the shoes off, laid down. 10 minutes later, he's there. Rezo, it's going down. So basically back with the shoes and on again. He was right. There was activity in the windows. And moments later, 2:04, the side door of the cafe opened up and the hostages started to pour out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We think it was 6 or 7. Hard to count at the time. And then there was the tension inside. You could see him pacing. You could see him moving the hostages around. And it was, 9 minutes, 10 minutes? And then, of course, the thing that we won't forget was the sound of the shotgun blast. And we now know it was a shotgun 75 centimetres from the back of Tory Johnson's head. It was the sound of someone being murdered right there, 40 metres away. And it was also the trigger for the police raid. The extraordinary thing is watching that. I've never seen anything like it. The explosion of light, of sound, more intense than anything I've ever seen come out of Hollywood. It just happened right in front of us, and it just felt like it went for an eternity. And as we said in the tape there, it went for 34 seconds, and then it was over. It was quiet except for the screams of help, cries of concern from the people inside. The lights came up in the newsroom, The sniper packed up his gun, put it in a bag, quietly walked away. I looked over the edge of the balcony at Channel 7. 4 federal police agents came out from desks. I hadn't even known they'd been there. I'd been there 6 hours, hadn't seen them. They packed up. For them, the day was over. For us, it was really just beginning. It was the beginning of the shot listing, the editing, the writing, compiling the reports, more live crosses. It was an extraordinary day. I walked out of there, I think, when did you go, Greg? 7 p.m. We both waited to the end of the bulletin. We did our thing, both walked out, and we went separate ways. And I got to say, it was an extraordinary 34 hours. And I'm notorious for needing my sleep. I'm not sure how I stayed awake that long. I sort of, last piece of advice is anybody that needs to do 34 hours of live TV should take 6 months holiday beforehand. But we're happy now to open up to Q&A. Michael, I think, is going to handle that.
Yeah, please congratulate Chris and Greg for really enthralling fishing product. I think Greg's got a career in journalism. You've clearly picked up a bit standing in front of so many live crosses over the years. Please, I mean, there must be a room full of questions. Andrew Rule. You speak up, Andrew, just speak up a bit.
I've got to say, as the hours ticked by, when we first went in there, my thoughts were the Australian way is the good way. Try and talk them out before going in the Americans and blasting the place up. But by the time it was getting to 14, 15, 16 hours, I started to question the value of that particular philosophy, applying it to this situation. They're effectively saying someone had to be injured or killed before the police went in. Those are the questions that the coroner has said he will look at and answer. I've done the same thing as you, Andrew. I've spoken to former SAS snipers and commando snipers about the shot that could have been taken. It was a tricky shot, no doubt about it. It had to get through the glass of Channel 7, and as Greg says, it reinforced, as everyone now knows, bulletproof glass. He had to shoot through that and then through the glass of the Lindt Cafe. Would that have altered the trajectory so much that it might have hit a hostage? Could they have exploded the glass seconds before taking the shot, which is a standard technique SAS use? There were plenty of ways for them to reconsider their approach. And then, of course, there's the whole debate about whether the military should have taken over rather than leaving it in the police hands. I tend to think like you, that I think the police themselves will be asking a lot of questions. And Greg, who developed a personal relationship with the sniper, I don't know did you feel frustration from his point of view?
I know undoubtedly he wanted to bring it to an end. That's what these guys are trained to do. I really feel for the police, the actual guy, the boots on the ground. The guys, one of them got injured running in. The guys, like, what extraordinary bravery to charge a cafe knowing that he had already killed people they were going to get shot at when they went in. So I'm very hesitant to be critical. Certainly never would be of the actual operatives on the ground, but I think I'm looking forward to seeing lessons learnt from this and perhaps the thorough examination of the power brokers that decided what to do and what not to do. I'm really looking forward to hopefully a lesson being learnt. But certainly my mates who are in the SAS and guys who are in the TRU are all of the same opinion. But hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yes, Megan, just wait, there's a microphone heading over to your direction.
Yeah, I'm just really interested actually in knowing a bit more about how you feel and how you felt during the actual event, because you're there, you're reporting the facts, the camera's, showing that, you're just repeating what's being seen, etc., reporting very much the facts. But actually, how did you feel? Because it's obviously quite a horrific thing to witness and to see all the behind the scenes and everything the police were talking about, etc. Just want to know how you felt really being there.
I'm not too brave or tough to say I was really affected by it. During it, I was pretty emotional of wanting to see it end. I was in that sort of feeling of almost helplessness, like we could seem, I knew what the police had at their disposal to end it if they chose to. But again, you wanted to see it end peacefully. The footage, there's footage that'll never be shown. There's the aftermath of them desperately trying to save the life of Katrina. All of that is the stuff that, you know, for weeks afterwards, I couldn't not think about. Every time you bumped into a colleague, every time I caught up with the boys from the other networks, understandably everyone wanted to talk about the siege. And family, friends, and it got really weird when you start seeing people out in Martin Place who would recognise you and want to come up and chat, and it's pretty tough. But at the same time, going back to what we said earlier, I really hope, if anything good can come from this, is that lessons are learned. And I'm pretty adamant the next person that pulls a stunt like that probably won't get 16 or 17 hours of grace from the police.
Yeah, same. I mean, the emotions, you do these stands reporters, you do those stories all the time, and I always tend to box stuff off and put it off to the side, but the weeks, days afterwards were difficult. And Greg's right, the scenes that we saw that we never put to air were just truly harrowing when the paramedics were trying to save Katrina. And personal emotions do play. I mean, I remember there was a point, that critical 9-10 minutes between the first shot being fired, the hostage escaping, then the final fatal shot being fired. We're just sitting there going, do something. And, you know, at times, with journos in the room will know, with TV journos, you sort of say to your cameraman all the time, take the shot. And this time I wasn't saying to Greg, I was saying it to the sniper. You just wanted to see an end to it. It didn't come. It didn't work that way. But yeah, it's as Greg says, it's something that hopefully lessons are being learned from.
Terry Marr. Who at Channel 7 management now takes credit for building the Sunrise studio over the road from the crime scene?
Yeah, it was, well, we talked a lot today about the bizarre way that this story transpired for both of us and for all of the employees at Seven. I think I can honestly say, and I know the cynics will say, bullshit, but we'd rather it not have happened. There are a lot of staff that are really, really affected by it. And the funny thing about it in the post weeks and months was, you know, and all those flowers came right up to our windows, was that it's always there, you know, like it's just when you're sitting down, you're having a conversation, you have a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, around the water cooler, the cafe's just there. It's just a constant reminder. And staff were sort of, you know, varying degrees were impacted by it. I don't think I'm letting any secrets out, but Seven was very swift in getting professional help in for people, and that professional help was used by an overwhelming number of the people, 150 people that work at Martin Place. So yeah, look, it was one of those things. Good fortune in terms of the location from a broadcast point of view, not so good from personal impact.
David. Yep.
David Polton, Chris. I'm not sure where the position sits in relation to the suggestion that part of the reason that Monis was there in the first place was the connection with Channel 7 and Sunrise and so forth. No doubt that'll be explored further perhaps in the investigation, but certainly I think it's true that media organisations generally are a magnet for people with issues, problems, you know, difficulties in their lives. I wonder, is there any lessons out of this for media organisations generally as to how they deal with those sorts of people, and at what point do they start to consider them as real threats?
Yeah, look, I mean, and it's a lesson Seven has taken extremely seriously. They've reviewed all of the security procedures and protocols in the building, and I'm pretty sure that would probably traverse around the network as well, because you're, you know, moth to a flame situation, and especially that studio, and especially because the protocols there, particularly with Sunrise, where Koshi, Sam, the crew will go outside twice in a show, and mixed with the public on air, live. And, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about this, and again, not telling too many secrets, but there's a bit of vision of security tape that several producers believe show Man Monis lurking in the background of one of those live crosses on the day. We haven't been able to confirm that it's him. The picture's too fuzzy, but the inquest will get to the bottom of, hopefully, of what his motivations were and whether he was actually trying to get into Seven that day or get get some sort of camera coverage from us. We really genuinely don't know.
Sally.
There were controls, obviously, by the police on what footage you could use during the event or the siege. What controls were there after the siege, both from the police and from the from Channel 7?
That was obviously happening well above me with our network news director, but you couldn't show, the request was not to show hostages in the windows, and then the earlier footage that had been taken, you would have seen they blurred out and blacked out faces to protect them and their families from the distressing images. Afterwards, it was just more of a moral decision, I think, that we would never show a person being resuscitated and the blood and gore. I think it probably comes under the Code of Practice Act that you couldn't show such horrific vision. And certainly, I asked, could they just literally destroy it? It all got subpoenaed by the police. My police statement went for 5 days. They wanted to go through every minute of it again, which was probably the last thing you want at Christmas, but that's what I was doing Christmas Eve. And I think from a news management point of view, the decision was just taken that it was, when we then produced that special and spoke to some of the hostages and went through it, I actually found that quite a helpful experience, that I was shooting a lot of those interviews but had the chance to make small talk when we were with these hostages for days and going through their interviews and swapping stories about what we had both seen and heard, and found that quite a beneficial experience. But all of them were pretty adamant too that they wanted it to be quite sensitive in the nature that the siege was portrayed.
Catherine.
Yeah, the way that that it ended obviously was very tragic, but the way that the media covered it was really quite remarkable, I thought. And quite early on, there seemed to be a decision made not to refer to it as a terrorist event or whatever, to actually be very responsible in the way it was covered. I just wondered how that actually played out on the ground on the day.
Yeah, it was. I agree with you. I thought the coverage was remarkable as well. Hats off to the industry. There were only a few breaches, and I'm not going to name networks or outlets that did, but you know, even to the point where the police were saying at one stage during the day, look, you obviously know who this is. We found out about 5 o'clock that it was Man Monis, and we knew his criminal history, but the police asked us not to reveal it because they thought it might jeopardise the operation. So, you know, everybody kept that information. I think it was finally released at about midnight. One network went with it but quickly withdrew it when it was pointed out by the police again. There was a general air of responsibility. I'm talking like it's a surprise. Well, it kind of is in a lot of ways. The media, uncoordinated, it's not like we rang each other up and said, what are you going to do? They took it upon themselves to actually handle this one properly. And even I had dinner with the chief public relations guy of the New South Wales Police the other night, and he's saying that the police, New South Wales Police, were exceedingly happy with the way the media covered that event from start to finish. That's pretty good. You know, that's something I think everybody's pretty proud of.
If you remember as well that the hostages were being forced to ring all the radio stations and media outlets. And another possible good anecdote that Rezo might have is when he was outside at the cruiser. Like, social media, I think, really came into its own for the first time. One of Rezo's stories I would tell is that his Twitter following went from, was it 8,000 to nearly 30,000 in one night. Like, and that really demonstrated the power of social media, which obviously everyone in this room is probably trying to embrace and get on board with as well. But maybe the story of the kid in the cruiser.
Yeah, well, Greg's right. I mean, it's you know, the power, the emergence, the evolving of the social media forum. And I was in that 7 hours when I was outside the building, and we had my camera was pointing up Phillip Street, where for a lot of the time that's where the police were assembled. The TRU guys who basically, you know, the kitted up, camouflaged, night vision goggles, all that stuff, were just at the end of the street, so we could see them clearly with our cameras. And the public had gathered around us, and so, you know, we were making decisions on the day about what to put to wear and what not to, and in cooperation with the police and responsibility, etc. As the pictures were being fed back to the station, but not going on air, you could see these cops gathering, looking like they might be about to go inside. It's about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm watching the picture on the TV screen in the live truck on the corner of the street, and about 20 people are behind me, all looking as well. One kid's there with his phone, rolling on the whole thing. I said, "What are you doing, mate?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just putting this straight up live on Facebook." So I pushed him away, slammed the door shut, and from that point on we had to keep the door closed. You kind of go, it's this animal that social media can be. There's no responsibility attached to it. And he was just young, he had no idea, but potentially, you know, that was about to jeopardise the police operation and therefore the lives of the hostages. So, yeah, there were lots of complexities to the coverage of that story.
Chris, given...
Alicia, yeah, we've got time for a couple more quick ones. Yeah, then Barry. Yeah, but Alicia first.
Given that you've covered so many sort of tragic stories, you become immune to the emotional side of things, and it would be the same for Greg. But is this a story that you now sort of look back and it's actually changed the way you live when it comes to, appreciating family and friends, and just it sort of has got that edge over, the countless other tragic stories that you've covered?
Definitely for me, the fact that it was at a cafe that myself and my colleagues frequent. Early on in the siege, one of my biggest fears was he kept rotating the hostages through the windows, and one of my biggest fears was I was going to see someone I knew. That night, I'm sure everyone at Channel 7 and anyone who works in Martin Place was bombarded with family and friends saying, "Are you okay?" Like, one of them was my wife, and I sort of said to her, "Look, I'm just a couple of blocks away at a police tape, just doing live stuff. I'm nowhere near it." Because I knew the music I'd face if I said, "Actually, I'm holed up with a sniper. It's all going down." So, and this is where my friendship with Rizo was put on the line, that she went to sleep. She said, "Text me if anything happens." And I just texted her, 2:30, saying, "Look, it was a really sad outcome, but it's all over. My car's in a lockout area. I'll be home when I can." She woke up at 7 a.m, flicked Sunrise on, and the first thing she saw was Rizo saying how Greg Parker had been holed up with a sniper all night. So, pretty close to death experience.
Yeah, well, the same as Greg. I mean, yeah, you do. You make adjustments. I always take these, and it's cold and clinical as it sounds, I always take the approach whenever I go into those sort of stories that it's the same as the police sniper. It's the same as a paramedic. It's the same as a fire brigade officer. You're there to do a job, and you put aside the personal feelings for the duration of the assignment, and then when you come back, you deal with it. And unfortunately, a lot of us deal with it with too much booze and not enough chat, and probably not enough professional help. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that, yes, does make you appreciate family and how precious they are, and yeah, you'd be inhuman if you didn't. Hugged them a lot tighter that night when I got home.
Barry Donovan. It would be impossible to guess, of course, what was going through Monis's mind through that whole period, but there has been a suggestion that he made contact with outside, whoever it was, an authority, whether it was police or who it was, and was making suggestions such as get me on the air, or get a senior politician, or get the Prime Minister on the air to make some comment, and I'll consider releasing a hostage. That was just a suggestion that was going around. Did you have any comment on that?
Yeah, that's factual. That his demands from early on were he wanted to talk to Tony Abbott, at least an online chat, and he wanted a chopper full of fuel to land in Martin Place that would take him away. And he said, and he wanted an actual ISIS flag as opposed to the jihadi message that he had, the homemade job, holding up in the window. So that was all relayed again to us, and that was all information that Chris was armed with that didn't broadcast at the time for fear of, at the request of not wanting to jeopardise the operation. And that's one of the things I guess we'll all look forward to hearing in the coronial inquiry as to whether or not perhaps some of those things should have been done.
This is the lucky last year, Belinda. How are
This seems like a flat question after those two, but going back to the question about how media handled it and how police handled it, what lessons were learned, or what went right, what went wrong about media who weren't there in the front line, who had to go through media liaison to understand, what they should and shouldn't be doing? Did New South Wales Media Liaison, Police Media Liaison do a particularly good job, an unusual job, a deficient job? How would you rate that?
I honestly can't say, because I wasn't part of that news gathering experience outside the building. We were focused on what we had, and we had better information than New South Wales Police Media did. Those PR guys would have been way behind what Greg and I were privy to. And it was all about the balance for us of what we could and couldn't release. But for outside media, I honestly don't know. From what I've been told, everybody was pretty happy certainly with the outcome. Media are never going to be happy with the amount of information. They always want more for fair reasons. But I think at the end of the day, there was no great complaints. I remember there was I was watching some Twitter feeds that some journalists were arguing that they should be allowed in the Channel 7 building as well, which we would strongly argued against for obvious commercial reasons. But it just so happened that for us, the front line was our building. So, and that was eventually the argument that persuaded the police to let me back in. And I was surprised. I was very, very surprised. Still don't quite understand why they took the risk. They did. And again, referring to that dinner with the PR chief the other day, they are happy it worked out, and he's reported back to the police commissioner. And it'll be interesting to see how, at the next major incident, how the police media relationship functions.
I think maybe you could sum it up by the experience of the two different officers. The one that told me to beat it, that wasn't interested in the fact that I had a clear headshot of the gunman inside the building, and then the other one that said straight up, "Holy shit, can you stay? We really can use this." Hopefully going forward, time will tell at the next, let's hope there is never a next, but if the next one happens, that there's a better relationship between the media and police perhaps, and that they can use the media for greater good, and the media can get better help out of the police.
And that's where we'll have to leave it, fellas. Thank you. That was absolutely amazing. An amazing experience for both of you.